Hello everyone, so this book review is on The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry, and it follows on from his popular TV series All Man. In this book, much as like the TV series, Grayson sets out to interrogate and examine masculinity in British society. What does being a man mean? How did that definition come about? And then Grayson goes on to examine is how that definition has become a very restrictive set of acceptable behaviours and appearances that have not only led to the subjugation of women, but have also created a very restrictive emotional life for men, and therefore a source of their own misery. And in a world that's changing, in a world of female emancipation and the sort of erosion of male dominance, Grayson is adamant that we need to address these notions of masculinity in order for men to move on and to become progressive members of society for their own benefit as well as society's itself. Now, I have to say, it's always tricky for me reading any book around sort of feminism, masculinity and gender, because I have obviously very high standards of my feminism, and I sort of read books of like, ooh, are you sure you mean that? Ooh, did you meet my own standards? I got absolutely none of that in The Descent of Man. Grayson is clearly a very robust feminist. He is very explicit about the violence and the subjugation of women, the need for quotas to address institutional bias. So all of that is given, and he is very adamant that men's behaviour and men are the source of that. But his focus here is on masculinity. He wants to get to grips with how men are impacted by masculinity, and how if men are going to have a greater emotionally fulfilled life, they need to address what are very restrictive standards of behaviour and appearance, and to get more for themselves. And I think this is so important because Grayson is incredibly articulate. He's a great cultural commentator, as anyone who's followed his career knows. And it's so important for men to talk to men and about men like this, because obviously it's not much use for women to talk about it, because obviously it's met with hostility. But Grayson is so articulate and very compassionate. Even though, as you saw in the TV program, he goes out to communities of bankers, he goes out to communities of kids and street gangs, to athletes, and he sort of explores how all of their behaviours are just acting out certain aspects of male behaviour: the need for success, the need for dominance, tribalism, for a sense of belonging, and how if men could just embrace more what we consider feminine behaviours and attributes, they would become more emotionally fulfilled. And therefore, ipso facto, he goes on to look at some of the problems that male society faces, whether it's their high suicide rates or perhaps emotional distance from their own children, and how addressing masculinity and addressing these restrictive notions of masculinity would improve life for men. This is a great book. It's relatively short. It's only about 170, 180 pages long, and I sped through it. He is not only a gifted orator, Grayson, but he's a great writer. And I really wish The Descent of Man could be spread widely amongst boys in school and young men, because I think this is such an important conversation. And I really enjoyed how Grayson was so open about his experiences, how he had suffered with notions of masculinity as well in his own life, whether it's through his personal experiences with his stepfather or in his transvestism. And how he has not only battled that masculinity, but how he has found a lot of emotional fulfillment from those challenges that he'd given to those notions and standards. I really enjoyed this book, and I recommend it to anyone. It's an incredibly easy read, and it's a very powerful and important one. The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry.